Distinguished heads of state, Secretary General Kofi Annan, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this very special and important session. I may call it a historical session for Africa's agriculture. I have the privilege to introduce someone who actually doesn't have to be introduced, so I can be very short. Secretary General, you are certainly one of the foremost statesmen of this century, and nobody can underestimate what you have done for peace and for the well-being of the world, we the people. And I'm particularly pleased to announce that you will devote some of your energy now to this continent. You always have been not only Mr. World, but you always showed your African face. And this morning, in a press conference, you announced the creation of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. And you, Mr. Secretary General, will have now a new title, the Chairman of AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution of Africa. And I know you will, in your speech, you will describe the alliance, but I just want to quote one sentence out of the press release which was distributed this morning. The Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa seeks to help millions of small-scale farmers and their families across Africa to lift themselves and their families out of poverty and hunger through sustainable increases in farm productivity and incomes. Mr. Secretary General, or now I should say Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours. Please, let's welcome very cordially again, Kofi Annan.
Thank you very much, Klaus, for that very warm introduction. I'm delighted to be here in Cape Town and to see so many friends and colleagues and well-wishers around. Mr. Heads of States, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 3 years ago, as Secretary General of the United Nations, I addressed the Africa's Green Revolution Seminar in Addis Ababa, a gathering of African leaders committed to achieving a goal that has eluded us for far too long, lifting, as Klaus said, tens of millions of our children, parents, brothers and sisters out of poverty and hunger into a world of opportunity and hope. Today I have the high honor of accepting the position of Chairman of the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. I am humble and yet excited. It is a real challenge and it can be done. I do this alongside all of you, our farmers, scientists, entrepreneurs, and elected leaders. I accept this challenge with gratitude to the Rockefeller Foundation and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations and all others who support our African campaign, and there are many. I do this because for me there is nothing more important. We must address poverty at its core. In Africa, this means enabling small-scale farmers to grow and sell their food. Our goal is to dramatically increase the productivity, food security, incomes, and livelihoods of small-scale farmers, many of whom are women. All of us, yearn for practical solutions to address the major causes of our continental poverty. An agricultural sector that has languished but is now poised to be much more productive and dynamic. It depends on us. We now know that the path to prosperity in Africa begins at the fields of African farmers. Unlike farmers almost anywhere else, African farmers do not produce enough food to nourish their families, communities, or the populations of our growing African cities. The facts are well known. Sub-Saharan Africa is the only region in the world where per capita food production has steadily declined. 1/3 of the continent's population is chronically malnourished. Most of our farmers lack access to productive crop varieties, adequate water resources, and soil nutrients. In fact, our soils are the most depleted in the world. Good roads are scarce. Universities and the research and talent they produce are poorly staffed and are underfunded. We face many challenges, but through this alliance, we have reason to hope. But hope must be more than a dream. It requires a mobilization of knowledge, capacity, and resources to end the human misery that ravages our continent. Many of our leaders have spoken about what is involved in launching a uniquely African green revolution, a revolution that looks to improve agricultural production as the basis of a larger effort to take Africa confidently into a new era of sustainable development. A revolution that improves the lives of farmers and delivers greater opportunity, enterprise, and prosperity. Such a vitalization of African agriculture involves an ambitious agenda, and the Alliance has such an agenda. Eager for results, the Alliance has begun implementing its programs already. In 2006, we began working with partners to develop new seeds for small-scale farmers that are more productive and resilient varieties of Africa's major food crops. Also in 2006, we launched educational programs to accelerate the development of African agricultural expertise and to monitor and evaluate our own work. Over the next 4 years, we will systematically build on these programs, adding initiatives to address other key aspects of the agricultural value chain. In 2007, we will launch a program to improve the health of Africa's soils, now the most depleted in the world. In 2008, again, we will launch a water management initiative to help Africa's small-scale farmers get the most for their water, more crop per drop. By 2009, we will address the key challenges facing off-farm systems and markets, such as improvements in the market information systems, crop storage, processing, and transport. Along with this work, the Alliance will strongly advocate for policies that support small-scale farmers, those that promote rural development, environmental sustainability, and trade favorable to the poor African farmers. I'm really happy that I have 2 African presidents sitting here with me, and I'm sure they will do that in their own countries immediately they get back home. Only with advocacy and policy change at national, regional, and global levels will small-scale farmers succeed in dramatically increasing yields, ending poverty and hunger, and lifting the economies of Africa. Beyond this 5-year time frame, the work of the Alliance will continue to be informed by African farmers in the field, women's associations, and partners and leaders from all sectors of agriculture. We expect to see dramatic improvements in the livelihoods of smallholder farmers within 10 to 20 years. We know that success depends on partnerships, and our approach is inclusive. All who share our goals are invited to this table. We are listening to others and learning about the approaches that are already improving food production in Africa. We launched our programs only after extensive discussions with farmers in the field, as well as with our partners, African institutions and others, and experts who are carrying out this work. In the coming months, the Alliance will build upon and expand these partnerships. We will meet with farmers' unions, women's associations, networks of agro-dealers, and civil society organizations. We will listen carefully to their needs and priorities and learn from their perspectives and experience. Many African leaders, as I said, have already committed to the Union's goal of reaching a 6% annual growth in farm production by 2015 and cutting food insecurity by half. This is a laudable goal which we should all support. The Alliance fully endorses these goals, and we will do all we can to help countries reach them. While ambitious, ours is a practical campaign. We are focused on developing locally driven and adapted solutions that address the full range of reforms required to ensure dramatically increased productivity in Africa's small-scale farms. Our farmers want better seeds, soils, and prices for what they sell. They want access to water, markets, and credit. They need to see national policies put in place that accelerate rural economic growth and investment and jobs. And now we know that this is a long journey. Although we know that, it does not stop us from being in a hurry. We aim to make concrete difference in our lifetimes. With respect to seeds, the Alliance is already in the fields, working with African farmers and African agricultural scientists to breed new varieties of maize, cassava, rice, beans, sorghum, and other major crops that will offer better resistance to disease and pest. Our goal is to produce 100 new crop varieties in 5 years, and to ensure farmers have access to these seeds. We will also move to create a wider network of local seeds distributors and agro-dealers to better serve remote rural areas. Building on the African Fertilizer Summit held in Nigeria last year, we will launch a soil health initiative to improve soil management practices. We absolutely must improve the quality and health of our farmlands. We owe it to ourselves and future generations to enhance Africa's natural resource base and ensure sustainability in production. Water management is a cornerstone of our plans. A crucial challenge ahead will be to improve water use, especially where water is scarce. We will do this by working with farmers who are eager to develop low-cost, small-scale water management and irrigation techniques. None of this will be possible without market improvements and increased access to credit for small-scale farmers. The ability of these farmers to sell their surplus crops is critical to any gains in African food production. So we will work with existing and new organizations on this continent to make this uniquely African revolution, uniquely African green revolution, a lasting force for economic and social progress. The Alliance is answering the call of many African leaders to build on the achievements and lessons learned from the green revolutions in Asia and Latin America that began more than a generation ago. That campaign, initiated by the Rockefeller Foundation, and I'm glad they are our partners here as well, saved hundreds of millions of lives and more than doubled cereal production. There is much to be learned from these tremendous successes as well as from their shortcomings. That said, ours is a revolution of the 21st century, one that we Africans own, whose destiny we will shape, and which responds to the specific environmental challenges facing our continent. We will offer a range of innovative solutions. African nations and farmers will choose those that are best suited for our cultures, climates, and economies. We will move forward by empowering farmers and engaging rural communities to improve agricultural production in ways that reduce social and economic inequity. Our success in this regard will necessarily be linked with policies that support Africa's women farmers. Women do the lion's share of Africa's farming. It is they who grow, process, and prepare the continent's food. It is they who gather water and wood. Yet, women lack adequate access to credit, technology, training, and agricultural services. We will be vigilant in protecting the environment that gives us our water, air, and land. We will conserve and make use of the natural biodiversity of Africa's crops and learn from the knowledge of our farmers. The world remains captive to the old idea that we face a choice between economic growth and conservation. This is a false choice. Our fight against poverty is directly linked to the health of the earth itself. Let me be especially clear on this point. We will revitalize African agriculture and help small-scale farmers while protecting and enhancing the quality of our environment. No doubt, ours is an ambitious agenda. And some would say that in Africa, we are awash in ambitions, in agendas, yet nothing changes. But I'm convinced that the effort I'm embracing today is moving us beyond the general commitment to help Africa's poor. It's moving us towards specific solutions backed by the resources, talent, and partnerships needed to produce the tangible results. You will be able to measure our progress by the harvest, the size of the harvest as they come in from the field, by testing the soils on the farms, and by looking at the improvement in the livelihoods of Africa's farmers. We have spent decades listening to people talk about Africa's problems, making promises to help. It is an experience that has left me thirsty for concrete action. The Alliance is about action, now, today, in a clear and meaningful way. The final point I wish to make is this: no country or region of significant size has been able to lift itself out of poverty without raising productivity in its agricultural sector. This is our challenge. It is a long-term effort, but one that, with our partners, is within reach. We in Africa know that, in the words of Nigerian writer Chinua Achebe, it is always morning, yet on Creation Day. We now have an opportunity to create a new day, and with it, a new morning in Africa. I close today with the plea that I offered in Addis Ababa 3 years ago. Let us do our part to help Africa's small-scale farmers end chronic poverty. And let us generate a uniquely African green revolution, a revolution that will help the continent in its quest for prosperity and peace. Thank you very much.
Mr. Annan, thank you very much, or perhaps I should say Mr. Chair, thank you very much for your address. Good morning to everybody. My name is Dumi Makhabo. I'm going to be moderating this panel discussion today. And before I say another word about the participants in this panel, or anything else for that matter, I'd like to emphasize that this is a discussion, that this is a debate, that we hope to be able to leave at the end of this discussion with some concrete ideas and re-emphasis on the actions and the work to be done forward rather than the policies that we have decided. With that said, I would just like to go through the format of this discussion / debate, whichever you choose, and also to quickly go around the table and introduce all of our speakers. Of course, we have Mr. Annan, and to both his left and right, we have two heads of state. We have Abdoulaye Wade, who is the president of Senegal, as well as Armando Emilio Guebuza, who is the president of Mozambique. If I could then introduce the remainder of the guests who gather around the table. We have Jay Naidu, who is the chairman of the board for the Development Bank of South Africa. We have Mampela Rampele, who is the executive chairman of Circle Capital Ventures here in South Africa. And I'm sure many of you know her in multiple roles, but that is the capacity in which she sits around this table today. And of course, we have Professor Klaus Schwab, who is the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. We are joined as well by Jacques Diouf, which is a change on the program. He, of course, is the Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Unfortunately, the President of Zambia, Mr. Levi Mwanawasa, as reflected on your program, isn't able to join with us, but I'm sure that we'll be able to get through the debate and come with some solutions at the end thereof. And also joining us, and I hope you don't think that I'm leaving this to last purely because of protocol, because I don't think that would be quite correct. I'm leaving these two introductions to last because I'd like for us to begin on the point of what is happening with the people on this continent on the ground, and thus these introductions come last. Dina Risli Kapiza is an agro dealer with the Tisawale Variety Group in Malawi. And also Florence Wambugu is the Chief Executive Officer of Africa Harvest Biotech Foundation International. She's based in Kenya. To all the participants, a very good morning once again to you. As mentioned, this is a debate, so I would like to offer each person, and perhaps Mr. Annan, you'll appreciate if I miss you on this round.
Absolutely.
We will give each of the participants literally 2 minutes, or less if you wish, to make your statement and perhaps state your position. And then I'd like to move on to the debate, and shortly thereafter we'll be able to open up to the floor as well, so we can ensure we get a whole wide variety of views and points of view across. So, Excellencies, perhaps if I could begin with you, the President of Senegal, Mr. Wade, if you could please go ahead.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. And I would like to thank my brother, Kofi Annan, and all they participate in the creation of this alliance for the green revolution in Africa. It is a very generous idea. But I would like to give you some information on what is going now in Africa. First of all, you should know that at the level of the summit of the African Union, we had many summits on the agriculture in South Africa and in Sirte, in Nigeria and in Sirte. And these summits were dealt only how to boost African agriculture, how to get rid from famine, and so on. Secondly, on the bilateral relations, Senegal cooperates with Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is realizing a green revolution. Our production in Senegal in 2004 for maize were only 80,000 tons. Where we use, we practice artificial raining. I don't know if it's a good translation in English.
That's right.
Burkina is the first country that practice artificial raining. And we borrow this method from Burkina with the cooperation with Morocco that realize the technical aspect. And we practice now artificial raining in Senegal since 2 years. First time our production of maize rise from 80,000 ton to 500,000 ton in Senegal. This is known by everybody. Secondly, from our cooperation with Nigeria, you refer to cassava. We succeed in growing cassava in the same proportion. And our ambition is really to realize 1 million tons of cassava. Burkina, since in 5 years, went from 700,000 to 5 million now ton. This is a revolution. This is a revolution. Revolution with the raining method performed by Morocco. That means that in our cooperation in Africa, we can make progress. Secondly, I would like to tell you that we have launched the plan REVA in Senegal. REVA, not REVA, REVA is green. REVA is Retour vers l'agriculture, going back to agriculture since 2 years. It was to solve the problem of the young people that go to Spain and France. And now we are helped by Spain, France, Republic Federal Allemande, and we are realizing modern farms in Senegal, managed by young people. You can invite you journalists to visit our realization. Okay. I can stop, please.
Mr. President, I didn't anticipate it would be that abrupt, but I do appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You have authority now, use it.
I do appreciate that. I sort of made a nod and it seemed to have worked. So thank you very much, Mr. President. President Gabuza, to you.
Yes, may I first of all congratulate our brother and ourselves for leading this organization, AGRA. Because being there, we know how professional he is, especially how dedicated he is as a son of Africa. We have shown this to the world. Also, I would like to say that I do believe that for us, in order to overcome the problems of famine, of hunger that we have in our continent, and in particular in our country, we need to develop this green revolution. And the fact that small scale is the emphasis in this case of AGRA, well, that's good, because only if we have a real change in the people that participate in production themselves, then we can see developments and double, probably triple our production in agriculture. In Mozambique, we are working on that direction, and we consider that besides trying to work for better seeds, get more water, create irrigation systems, we need to have training for people. As you may be aware, in our country, most people will be trained in general courses, high school. The knowledge they come with in the secondary school is usually not relevant to change situation in the communities. So our emphasis is on technical training, and we need a lot of support on that area, not only in agriculture, but other related issues. So basically, I think that we are going to make it as a continent, and in the case of Mozambique, we are determined to make it work, and it's starting to work.
All right, Mr. President, thank you very much for your remarks. Jay Naidu, if I could come to you, please. And I am watching the clock.
Thank you very much. We've been asked today to be bold, courageous, and innovative in the context of Africa's green revolution, to be revolutionary. I think yesterday President Mbeki talked about the launch of an African infrastructure fund. And that's reached $600 million. That's already been accumulated, and is setting a target of $1 billion by the end of the year. What's unique about this is that this is money from Africa, from African institutions. It is raised in the context of an appeal by African leadership, and it's run by Africans, and it's going to meet African needs. I think from the DBSA, which I represent here, we've contributed $100 million to this. This is where we are putting our money where our mouths are. And I think that's it. It's about using those funds to do two things: deliver the infrastructure, the roads, the energy infrastructure, telecoms infrastructure, the irrigation that we are talking about, and the agro-processing that will make our green revolution really happen. And secondly, to build an entrepreneurial layer where we are taking the small-scale farmers and we are growing them to be medium-sized and eventually large, globally successful agricultural companies. That is what we are saying. So in a sense, what we are saying is that we are building leadership here that will be commercially successful, but passionate about building a better life for African people. And I think that's the goal. And what I believe is necessary today, because NEPAD projects that we will need $20 billion per year over the next 10 years to achieve the goals that our leadership have set in the African Union. I can say today, in the DBSA, we spend close to $200 million outside of South Africa in infrastructure development. But it's a ratio of $1 for we co-finance with other partners, $5 other. So eventually, our accumulated investment is $1 billion. We can do this. What we need is political leadership, which I'm very glad is now being provided by the Secretary General Kofi Annan. And what we need is a new Marshall Plan, which we design and we implement to meet our needs in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mampela Rampele.
I'm just very proud to be an African this morning because I'm amongst my African leaders, and the African people around this hall are really united in saying, why would this unique revolution in this case succeed where others have failed? We believe it will succeed for the very reason that Jay has just mentioned, that African leaders themselves have committed. They haven't just talked, but they're following through, as our leaders here indicated the examples from their own home bases. But in an African-led and initiated revolution, we also have partners, because partnership matters. But what is also important is that because African leaders are leading the pack, the issue of good governance, which is at the heart of any sustainable development process, is also embedded in this. We also have another missing element from previous attempts, which is taking Africa's talent very seriously, developing young Africans to look to agriculture as a future for science, for research, for development, and for extension service. And working together with our governments, we believe we can drive the implementation of these laudable ideas that our chair, the Secretary General, has just indicated. But in doing so, we are taking a comprehensive approach. We are not going to say we're going to only look at seeds, only look at soil health, only look at water, only look at the ecology. We're taking a comprehensive approach that puts at the center the importance of people in driving sustainable development. And we are going to utilize Africa's greatest human resource that has not been utilized in major initiatives, Africa's women. Africa's women have grown the food of this continent for millennia. Now they are going to be at the heart of this. By giving them support in terms of markets, by giving them support in terms of finance, we can have Africa having the dignity. Food security is about dignity. Just think about each time the rose that you have planted in your garden blooms, the joy it brings to you, the sense of accomplishment. That's really what this is about, and that's what makes the difference.
Thank you. It's really exciting to acknowledge that we certainly don't have a lack of passion in this room, and I hope by the end of it all we'll feel equally passionate about this cause. Klaus Schwab.
I just want to relate this revolution to some other developments which we see in the world. First, I think there's a growing awareness about the importance of water management, and you mentioned it, more crop per drop. I think water shortage will be the great issue in the next years in general around the world. Second, I'm very concerned about the statistics I read about the impact of the rush to biofuels, the impact on global food prices, and of course it has again an impact on the internal situation of Africa. Third point, you spoke about the seeds, Kofi. I feel the genetic revolution certainly will come into the picture somewhere also, and we can expect quite some progress in this field. And the last point relating to you, Jay, you spoke about entrepreneurs. I think there's something very remarkable going on now in India, where business has discovered the potential of helping farmers, particularly by building capacities, providing e-access, to become really entrepreneurial and to revolutionize the Indian agriculture. And here, I think business is playing a lead role and sees it as a great investment opportunity.
Right, Klaus Schwab, thank you. Jacques Diouf.
Thank you very much. I will first start thanking Annan for having kept his promise he made to me that when he leaves the post, he will work on agriculture. I first want to say that the great change is the priority that African heads of state themselves have decided to give to agriculture with the decision of Maputo to double within 5 years the share of agriculture in their national budget, and to focus on agriculture as the vehicle for socioeconomic development, including rural infrastructure and water control. This is happening. The African heads of state have adopted a comprehensive Africa agriculture development program for the whole continent, and 51 African countries have prepared their national medium-term investment program for food security and the relevant bankable investment project profile for $10 billion. Already 10 African countries have implemented their national program on food security. 7 are preparing those programs, and 10 are in the level of review. So it's happening under the leadership of Africa and of African heads of state. And the results are encouraging. When we look at the average annual growth of the agricultural sector from 1994 to 2000, Africa is having a level of 3.9% against a total world average of 2%. So Africa is already almost double. And when I look at other regions of the world, we have East and South Asia 2.4, South Asia 2.3, Latin America and the Caribbean 2.6. So Africa is moving in the right direction. But we have to recognize also that there are weaknesses. This is based on rain-fed agriculture. If you have a drought, then all these results will be lost. We have to recognize the challenges, as was just mentioned by Professor Schwab, of bioenergy. We have climate change. So there are a number of new challenges emerging that Africans have to deal with, and they have to invest in this rural infrastructure, in water control, and rural road, and other facilities to consolidate this progress. Thank you.
All right, Diouf, thank you. Dina Kapiza, I don't want to preempt anything you'll say, so please go ahead.
Thank you very much for giving me that opportunity. In fact, I'm overwhelmed to be here amongst the big heads, the big brains. I'm just so little from Malawi and agro-D research. It gives me encouragement to air out my views on the agriculture, on the green revolution, in fact. In Malawi, we are trying to raise agriculture productivity through the agro-dealership. Previously, in fact, I'm glad that you are talking much about the farmers, the rural farmers. And there was a missing link between the farmers and the input suppliers, as you are talking that the soil is depleted. So these farmers needed to access the farm inputs, and they need this. And it's exactly what is happening in Malawi. Now, the missing link was someone who could provide the farm inputs closer to the farmer and at affordable prices. And it's exactly what the agro-dealers are doing in Malawi. In that way, we have managed to raise agriculture productivity. And also, we are promoting the green revolution. How can we promote it? Through strengthening the usage of new technologies. How do we get these new technologies? We did the training. And here I'm just very glad to see that the African leaders are coming together now to hear our concern. The African farmer is left very far in the village. He has no means of reaching this place. So I'm just trying to voice, maybe because I'm just overwhelmed, maybe I may be repeating here and there. So I'm just very glad that you are committed to raising agriculture productivity, hence improving the green revolution for Africa. We are Africans. I'm proud to be African, as my friend has already put it, and I'm proud to develop Africa. We can do it. Thank you.
Dina Kapiza, thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, Florence Wambugu.
Thank you. I think like Madam Kapiza, I say I'm overwhelmed to be here with the heads of state, and I represent a whole age of interested parties. From scientists, I used to be a researcher turned a development person, but I must say that the green revolution has come at the right time, because experience working with the grassroots communities, I've been working with the grassroots communities, is that our grassroots farmers, if we are going to move agriculture to become the engine of economic growth, we really have to move the smallholder farmer on the ground, because that's where the wheel meets the tarmac, and that's why my experience and expertise and what I can share with you where the challenges are. And if I summarize why I see many of the farmers, is a situation where I can just compare with a car stuck in the mud. And I think many of you have driven the rural areas, maybe one time or the other you got stuck. And to push it out, you need to have a driver driving in the right direction. You need people to push, but you also need a strategy. Otherwise, you just go round and round and you don't get out. And in this table and this green revolution, I am saying that I'm seeing indicators that we could get out of the mud and by pushing the grassroots communities out of the mud. And the driver here is not just political good governance, which we need, and I'm glad we have heads of state, is to create the enabling environment in policy, in financing, and not just political leadership, but scientific leadership. We have to redefine who is an expert in Africa. And I say very clearly, as a person who has made it work, I see Madam Kapiza here as an expert, experience on the ground, and use this experience to push the other people in the right direction. Then the pushers, we got clear pushers, key indicators to what do we do to move the grassroots out. And here are issues like high-value crops, technologies, accessing the water, the fertilizer, and all the inputs that the farmers need. But lastly, but not the least, is the strategy on how we do it. Again, if everybody's pushing in different directions, you don't move out. You just go around again. And so it's important, again, we push together. Here I see the private sector laying a law in helping us in the marketing. I see the strategic alliances, integrated approach. I'm glad some of the donors like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are not just funding agriculture, they are funding medical. If you are sick, you cannot be able to actually grow your crops. I also see the bottom-up approach, which is helping farmers educate women and bringing the whole value chain down to the grassroots communities. I'll later share with you experience and example on what we have been doing. But we have to look at those success models and scale them up. Because if we do the same thing, we get the same results. We will not get out. So thank you.
Florence Wambungu, thank you very much. Now, at the beginning of this discussion, something that I think came to the mind of most people in this room, it's safe to say, is that we've had this discussion before. That Mr. Annan pointed out the speech that he made 3 years ago. President Wade talked about various summits and meetings about agriculture. Mampela Rampele referenced the fact that what has been different before, rather now than before, is the fact that now it's Africans taking it into their own hands. Now, Jacques Diouf, you were pointing out some numbers and telling us all about how Africa is making progress at 3.9% versus other parts of the world. However, when I listen to some of the stories on the ground, I don't know where that 3.9% is. Where is it?
Well, if I take, for example, the case that President Wade just mentioned of what is happening in Burkina Faso, it's happening in the field. If we take Nigeria, we have seen also they have 130 million people. They're having a growth of an average of 6%. Of their agriculture in the recent years. I can continue citing example of African countries that are making progress, but we have 53 African countries. Not all are making progress.
If I can interrupt you, you talk about you can cite a long list of African countries that are making progress. Can you give us a sense of some numbers? Is it 10? Is it 5? Is it 20? Is it 30? Approximately?
Around half of them now. Are progressing very well. But as I said, this progress is not up to the level needed because the target was 6%. I'm talking of 3.9%. The second problem is that this is very fragile. It's depending essentially on the rain. At the same time, for example, we are having problem in the Horn of Africa of drought. Therefore, we have to rush food aid. We saw what happened recently in Niger and other countries. We are rushing also food aid. 4 years ago, it was Southern Africa. We were obliged also to rush food aid because of drought. Therefore, also these are factual results and progress. It is not solid. Unless we put the infrastructure base, unless in addition to the infrastructure base we deal with the problem of high-yielding varieties, we deal with the problem of the value chain of agricultural production, we will continue to have difficulties in relation also to the growth of the population of Africa, which will reach 2 billion persons by the year 2050.
President Gabuza, if I could come to you, the natural inclination then is to say we need some kind of active, deliberate support, whether it comes to infrastructure development, whether it's funding and financing from government level. At the same time, I'm sure there are many who will question the commitment of many African leaders to concretely, deliberately, and concisely address this issue. Is there really a will among your peers?
The will is there. The problem is the conditions, capacity to provide the help that is necessary and support that's necessary. As I can see, really all most African countries will be understanding that there is a need of having infrastructures, better seeds, better system of commercialization of trade, etc., etc. But where are we going to get resources? And the resources that we are getting up to now, they are not enough. They cannot respond to the needs that we have. For example, talking about what President Wadi just said about having artificial rain, we in Mozambique have regions where we know for sure that cyclically we are going to have drought. Where do we get artificial rain to solve problems that we have on those areas? We don't have the resources. We know that in some areas in Mozambique, close to the border with Malawi, we are producing a lot of maize and of wheat. But that wheat or maize cannot reach Beira, which is something like not that far, because the situation of roads is not good. The circulation of information is not good, etc., etc. The banking system is not there.
No, if I may ask a question here. I mean, both leaders, you and President Wan, have talked about artificial rain. It's an expensive process. Why would we wait and then go and spend money on artificial rain when we don't even harvest the rain that we get? The water management issues that Diouf has been talking about for years. Some parts of Africa do it very well. They harvest rainwater. Each farmer or each house is supposed to do it. But we don't do it, and we talk of artificial rain. We should also understand that in improving the rural agriculture, it's not just only food production and food security we are assuring, but we are also creating jobs and making it possible for people to make a decent living in rural areas and not all rush to the capitals, into slums, and put pressure on the capital, particularly when you consider the fact that you may not even be able to get the food supplies to the capital, given the example that you gave. But so the water management aspect is very, very important. Not everyone can afford artificial rain, nor should we rely on that without harvesting the water.
The whole idea is that we talk about artificial rain, not saying that that's the only factor. It's just to say that even if we want artificial rain in areas that badly need it, we cannot afford that. But we have other elements. Let's talk about, as we're talking about infrastructure, system of communication, information, it's very important. And the banking system in rural areas. For example, we may have a lot to produce or produced in rural areas, but because we do not have the banking system in those areas, they're all in capitals, then it's difficult to stimulate production in those areas.
I'd like Jane Naidu to talk in just a moment about the question of funding, banking, etc. But I think, with due respect, President Gabuza, Mr. Annan made a very deliberate point, and he asked a very specific question. Is it not a question of rather looking at how the resources that you currently have are being utilized, rather than trying to find the new solution that's going to cost you potentially more money? I mean, are you utilizing the resources, the minerals, the infrastructure, the funding that you have adequately? Forget about making new rain or artificial rain. What about the rain that already is there?
You are right on that. You are right on that. What I was saying is that artificial rain was not the only factor, but I was saying also that we have other problems in place that create difficulties. You may remember that when I was talking, I spoke about technical education. We may have a lot of production, or we may have a lot of things, but if we do not have people who are skilled enough in rural areas, then differences will not take place.
Well, perhaps we're going to have to go
Can
around.
I come
Please
in
go
at
ahead.
that point about the people side? Because I think, as the President has just said, there is now a commitment. The question is, are there resources? And if we put into the resource equation management, I think we have not thought of the public sector in terms of strategic management. And my sister there spoke about the importance of strategy. When you are stuck in the mud, you can't just run on the same spot. You need strategic management. And yet, when it comes to the public sector, we think about who's more popular than who, rather than who has the ability to help us develop the strategies, implement them, monitor and evaluate so that we can attract more people. Because a good leader attracts other good people. And so I think that here the presidents and my sisters and brothers in the continent, we really have to rethink public sector management and think more strategically about who should we get there to get us to do what we need to do.
President Wad, I know you want to make a comment, and we'll do so in just a moment. Everybody wants to make a comment. Okay, I'm going to go around the table in just a moment. But whenever we have this discussion, it's often a question of resources, which means money, and then human resource in the know-how and the management of those resources. Jay, you were talking to us earlier about a $20 billion commitment through NERPAD over the next 10 years.
It's a $20 billion requirement to achieve the goals that we are setting ourselves.
I was hoping commitment. I was hoping for commitment.
No, I think that the important thing, however, is that if you take South Africa, which is in many ways a bit unique, we are spending at the moment in committed projects with funding $10 to $15 billion a year. The problem in South Africa is not money. It's the capacity to take it from money into bricks and mortar that improve the quality of lives of people. So I think that we've got to address the issue of capacity. And the bottom line is that we need a partnership, a smart partnership. A partnership between governments, between NGOs, between social foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundations. And we need to use the market. We need to crowd the private sector into using their expertise and the operational capacity to deliver public goods using the market. And I think that is a real possibility. Mr. Secretary General, you have done many things in your tenure as the Secretary General. But one thing that you did in 2002 is that you launched an initiative on nutrition. It was an alliance to fight for the improvement of nutrition in the world. Today, I chair that initiative. We run projects in 20 countries around the world, from China and India to many countries in Africa. And I can tell you today, working with the private sector and working with governments, we have programs in place that will deliver fortified, healthier food to 600 million people within the next 2 to 3 years. That is happening. And we've got the commitments of the private sector, who will get a return on their money, to be able to deliver public goods that previously only government was interested in. How do we interest the private sector in public-private partnerships that get them involved in delivering the infrastructure that Madam Kapisa needs, that Florence needs, and I think it's a very real possibility if we have the political will.
President Wad, you wanted to make some remarks.
Yes, thank you very much. We have noticed that in the raining season in Sahelian countries, it dropped about billions and billions of tons of water that goes in the ground or to the sea. From that, we have built what we call bassin de rétention, basin of containing reservoirs. Yes, reservoir. We have built now about 220 of these. large of 100 meters and 200 meters long. This transforms completely the conditions of the peasant, of the rural population. In the dry season, they can grow, and they grow now, vegetables and many other things. You can eat, they eat and export. I have proposed this at the meeting and the Summit of Africa. Maybe you were in Bamako. And it was supported by, now it was supported by European. And I exposed this in the last G8. And we asked GA to help us to build a band large of 150 kilometers from Dakar to Djibouti, where we built this bassin de rétention. This will introduce a really revolution. Last thing, 2 years ago, the African countries that not import petrol, we have launched the Green OPEC. The Green OPEC. I am the president now of the Green OPEC. We had a meeting in Senegal and in Morocco. We have 15 countries, founder countries, with the purpose to grow in Africa the bio plants for biodiesel. And now many investors from Germany, from Europe, America, they are coming in our countries to grow biodiesel. This is to help us to get rid from the shortage of oil, because the price of oil, the soaring price of oil has destroyed our growth. Lastly, I would like to tell you that from our cooperation with India, everybody knows that Senegal is depending on rice. We import 600,000 tons by year. That means we pay 110 million of dollars. Now we have with India building our capacity to grow rice in Senegal. And we have now available the old materials, the engine and the equipments. And company, an Indian company, is now established in Senegal to help along the river, Senegal River, to grow in 5 years the quantity we need. This is very, very important. If you permit me, last word. to Mr. Kofi Annan.
Are you getting me back because I didn't let you finish earlier?
This is the last of the, because you see, the problem is very serious. And I regret we have not time to discuss very deeply on this matter. We tried 3 years ago, because in Mali, Republic of Mali, there are big land, millions and millions of hectares available now. We can grow there what we want for West Africa and even Africa. This land is not exploited now. And we launched a plan. We said, in Mali, we bring Senegalese, Malian and Senegalese, grow rice there for our consumption. But we noticed that the price of this rice is higher than the price we import in Senegal. So we did not succeed. I proposed a financial solution that is this differential. We should find somebody who finances this differential. Financing 100 1 year, 800 the second year, 60 the second. In 5 years, by improving the competitivity and the productivity, in 5 years, we should be able, our Senegal and Mali, to find their rice and to not import again rice. we didn't find anybody to finance this operation. And if you get money, this can be the first experience of your alliance. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Watt. Florence, please go ahead.
Thank you, Tommy. I think this debate is getting very interesting, and I just want to bring it back to the focus that over 200 million people in Africa live below $1 a day. They are hungry. They are grassroots rural communities who really are the focus of impact for this AGRA, and we must get back to that there are all these people who are hungry, who are poor, and these are the people we are working with. And they're the people who I see that are stuck in the mud, and we need to push them out with this AGRA. And I'll go back to the experience we are having in Kenya, working with the thousands and thousands of farmers. How are we getting them out of poverty and into sustainable livelihoods? Because that's what we need to do. And the first thing is information, education, training. Information is power, empowerment. Kapisa told me that when she got her education on agro-dealer, that's what changed her from a losing person to a prosperous, successful business lady who is teaching others. And then beyond that is, where do we link to the market seed rings? Where do we find improved seeds from international research, from private sector? These people are not, there's a disconnect. They are not linked. And that's why the agro-dealers come in. And we had to do that using tissue culture banana, link them to the private sector distributors. So the private sector must play a role in this, getting our farmers out. The third and most important is linked to the inputs, water, manure, fertilizer. All these must come in. And the last but not the least is market links. And these markets do not necessarily have to be international market. It's organizing the local markets. And then the urban market and the regional markets. And one of the challenges we have is that we have focused too much on export crops, giving them all the support, the coffee, the tea, and we've forgotten the orphan crops that provide the food for the grassroots community, the sorghum, cassava, banana, yams, sadora. They have been left out of this. And I'm glad to know that AGRA, who we are going to work with, they are actually focusing on these orphan crops. And so when the farmer plants their banana in Kenya, tissue culture banana, they ask me, if after I eat, because most of them are hungry, they start by eating first and getting nourished. Then they ask, where am I going to sell the surplus? So we can't forget the market. And so it needs to be an integrated approach to getting our farmers out. It can't just one thing. And the policy and development need to shape up. There are many, many products we should bring, and even improved products. They are not coming because of lack of policy framework. We are not bringing biotech crops or seeds or that because of lack of framework, policy framework. The other things we need to bring in, and we need policy framework. Thank you.
Dina, go ahead.
Yeah, just to continue on that, as my friend has already put it, we need to strengthen the community level retailers if we are to succeed in this. As she has already put it, these small-scale farmers need to find markets, and we are the right people to provide markets for them. And in turn, we also create our own market, and then we boost our businesses. If we leave these people, the small farmers, stuck in the mud, we are nowhere. We will reach nowhere. So let's strengthen these community-level retailers as well as the small-scale farmers in the village. Thank you.
Well, I think that this... Yes. First, I definitely agree that unless we get an approach village by village, which is the basis of the national program on food security, we will not achieve our goals. Because we have to deal with the problem where the people are who are hungry and who produce. And all our programs that the different countries prepared, and again, let me say 51 African countries prepared their national medium-term investment program and bankable investment project profile for $10 billion. We have to find the funding for these activities. On the waterfront, we have also to look at facts. Only 4% of arable land is irrigated in sub-Saharan Africa, against 38% in Asia. And it's not for lack of water. Africa is using only, sub-Saharan Africa is using only 3% of its renewable water resources against 14% in Asia. Unless we solve that problem, we will continue to have an agriculture which will be dependent on the vagaries of the climate. On biofuel, bioenergy, be it biofuel or biodiesel, we have a problem of natural resource base. We have the problem of land, we have the problem of water. How do we appropriately allocate those resources for production of food and for production of biofuel, essentially sugarcane, corn, and so on, or biodiesel when we deal with palm oil and other products. The two can be done if we have the natural resource base. But if it is a zero-sum game, and we should displace food production for biodiesel, then we would have a problem, because there are still 30%, 28 to be more precise, of the people on the continent who are hungry.
But Jacques, I think the suggestion being made isn't to replace anything with anything. I think the suggestion we're hearing continually is how we do all of these things in parallel. And that's the conversation that we need to make sure that we focus on. I am going to open the questions to the floor in just a moment, because I do try to keep my promises. So please just give an indication when you want to. Shortly we'll be able to do so. Prepare yourselves, prepare your question. But Klaus, you wanted to make a comment.
Let me just make a practical proposal, and I want to test the readiness for smart partnerships. And you, Mr. Diouf, you mentioned we have to go village by village. We have heard the essential factors are management, capacity, and so on. All factors companies are very well equipped with. Now, I would propose, Kofi, that you may create a kind of adoption program where companies adopt one or two villages and try, based on their own know-how, to help those villages to become role models with a strong possibility for replication later. I think it's a win-win situation at the end. And I just want to test who in the audience to see whether my proposal also has some practical appeal. Who in the audience would be interested in principle to participate in such an adoption program?
Well, a few.
So we see quite some hands which are raised, and we, of course, we are ready to cooperate and help.
The question that I have regarding bringing in corporates and companies on this issue is that most corporates have the task of managing their corporate social responsibility. However, what often finds when you're talking about corporate social responsibility is that some may find it's not sustainable. Why is it then that we are talking about it in that context and not addressing, and perhaps Jay, you can give some insight into this, why is it then that we're not addressing how people who are at the grassroots, who are these smaller scale farmers, can be incorporated into some of these business models as part of the client base rather than being the recipient of the aid?
No, that's precisely the issue, and I think many speakers around the table have mentioned the experiences in other parts of the world. This lesson has been learned in many parts of the world. For example, in Bangladesh, working with a company called Annan from France, produces yogurt, and the Grameen Bank of Muhammad Yunus, we have supported them to create a yogurt product where the real wealth of poor people in Bangladesh is the cow they earned. So they bring their 1 liter of milk to a dairy. They get paid immediately for it. That is made into a yogurt that is fortified and made nutritious, and that is distributed by other women in an entrepreneurial way. So they are absolute models of working at what we call at the base of the pyramid, which we need to, in a sense, harness the technology, the management expertise, etc., of the private sector, and in fact, crowd them into producing products and services using market-based methods where they are getting a return, but they are developing new markets as well. So I think it's an absolute necessity for us to take that, the point that Professor Schwab is making. At the end of the day, it's if you pass knowledge, like Madam Kapisa has said, she got the knowledge. It was like agricultural extension. If all the Agrarian Alliance does is provide that knowledge, which helps people develop, to be mentored, and become more effective, that would be the greatest contribution we're making. But I think banks like ours now must start to think creatively. How do we finance the type of road to the village? How do we finance the cooling facility if you're collecting milk? How do we finance some processing if you're producing fruit or vegetables? So I think that's it, and it links to the broader issue which our political leadership handles of access to the markets of the developed world. But we must begin within Africa to trade amongst ourselves.
One thing that you mentioned was key relationships, and I know Mampela Rampela wanted to speak specifically about the market in relation to Africa and India. Go ahead.
I just think we have spent a lot of energy trying to get markets opened in Europe and everywhere else, and neglected 800 million people live on this continent. If we focused on markets for staple food, it's worth more than 50 billion a year compared to the energy we put into 8.5 billion for traditional exports. It doesn't make sense. I mean, back to the issue of strategic management. And we've moved into horticulture, which again is directed at export markets, 7.5 billion. Look at the opportunity costs or the opportunities that exist for utilizing what the president is talking about. If Mali and Senegal were to work together, I would guess, Mr. President, one of the problems with why your rice is not competitive are input costs. Everybody is putting levies on import and export. We need to break down the boundaries between African countries and really look at crowding in the African clientele and to focus on small and medium enterprises. I couldn't agree with Jay more. We have been captive to big business. We've forgotten that, in fact, it's the small and medium enterprises that have grown Southern Europe, that have grown many other parts of the world, including India and China. So this is the opportunity.
All right. I'd like for us to take the opportunity, speaking of opportunities, to tap into some of the great minds that are sitting with us in this room, not just around this table, and open the floor to questions. I've been told that there aren't too many. We've got one right at the back. Time for too many, but let's get straight to it. There's a gentleman right at the back in the white shirt. Please introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and then go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Don McDevitt. I'm from Zimbabwe. To Mr. Annan. In terms of agreement that the first step to economic prosperity is consistent food security, and that the second step underlying that is a leadership integrity, which we believe should focus on economic enablement. But I think we keep skirting around the third step, which is cost-effective logistics. And when we talk about cost-effective logistics, is $20 billion enough? When we start talking about road and rail networks from a continental perspective. My question then is, what percentage of our defense budgets would be required if we moved it from defense into agriculture, we invested in seed instead of bullets, fertilizer instead of guns, and maybe road and rail networks instead of tanks and airplanes? Thank you.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think at one point we even suggested that African leaders should back away from military expenditure and in fact get them to limit their military expenditure to 1% of the budget a year, military and security, and use the resources precisely for the kinds of things that you talk about. Yes, we've had we live in a continent that has seen lots of conflicts. But when you look over the past decade, we have been able to deal with quite a few of these conflicts. Angola is now at peace. The situation in Sierra Leone is much better. It's more or less at peace. Liberia, you look at Eritrea, Ethiopia, the war between them has been stopped. The Democratic Republic of Congo had its first elections in 45 years and now has a president. And we need to focus on resolving all these conflicts to be able to devote our attention to economic and social development. And you're right. lots of governments are spending lots of money on the military. Honestly, I don't see where the threat is coming from. What they should do is to focus on democratic policing, making sure you have effective police that will protect the individual and their property and their rights, but not spend so much money on the army when there are no external threats, and you sometimes use it to suppress the population. You don't need that. And
It's
so,
paradoxal.
Yeah.
I would
you
say,
agree with me?
I would say Africa.
You're going to spend less on military.
No, I would say just on this point that by now, Africa want to intervene in Sudan, but we have not arms.
No, but that's no.
All right, gentlemen, Mr. President, with all due respect.
Senegal, they have our troops there in Darfur. They killed 5 Senegalese there because they had not arms. You know, for defense themselves. Please, let me tell you something. The problem of Darfur, it is interesting to insist on the problem of Darfur. Yeah. What is it? Arms and troops. Many African countries do not want enough troops for Darfur. They ask the troops from outside, and Sudan refused. But about the arms, Senegal buy its arms for the troops that are in Ivory Coast and in Darfur. Don't tell that we have enough arms. I don't know.
Mr. President, the chairman gave me the authority to direct this debate, and I intend to exercise it fully. I'm going to avoid a debate and a discussion about arms in Darfur. However, I think the question was a very valid one to speak specifically about the amount of money that is directed towards arming ourselves for a threat that Mr. Annan says doesn't necessarily exist. President Gabuza, I think it's a very straightforward question. You're buying guns, you're buying arms and armaments. Why not reduce how much money you're spending on that and put it into agriculture?
I hope I had some money.
Well, the money that you do have, I mean, if you look at the allocation, is that not a fair thing to ask? A small percentage of the funding that you're spending on your armaments directed to agriculture.
Most of our money we are spending on the social areas, education and health, and it's not enough.
It's not enough, so you can reduce the defense budget, right?
Most of our money we're spending on areas.
All right, there are a few questions. 2 gentlemen in the front. We'll get to you shortly. There's one in the back here who has the microphone. If we could get 2 over here in the interim, please. Can we get the mic working, please?
My name is Paul Capitalist from the African Institute of Corporate Citizenship. I'd like to agree with Mampila's comments about export. The Kenyan green bean farmer has worked very, very hard to produce a straight green bean, which is can be consumed in London. Now the Sainsbury's and Marks and Spencer's are being challenged not to import green beans from Kenya because there's a carbon footprint issue. Where does it leave the Kenyan green bean farmer? We have to be very careful. This World Economic Forum, we have a strong focus on mining and a strong focus on agriculture. I think we have to link the two, and I think an important discussion about how can mining catalyze agriculture so that when you close down the mines, there's some sustainable forms of economic development that can take place.
I think that's a great suggestion, particularly for some of the heads of state. All right, there are 2 gentlemen in the front here. If we could begin on my right, please introduce yourself and go ahead.